Are you getting played by your dispatcher? On this episode of Driven Too Far, we're calling out the shady games that dispatchers play. Hello, I'm Andrew Winkler with Chief Carriers, and this is Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking, a podcast that helps over-the-road truck drivers balance career and family. Hey, welcome back to Driven Too Far. Now, before we go too far down this rabbit hole this week, just let me say that there are way more good dispatchers out there than there are shady ones. I've had the privilege over the years of working with some real professional dispatchers, and these are people that they're out there working for your best interest. They're out there getting you the miles, getting you home when they're supposed to, doing everything right, and just maximizing the efficiency of both the equipment, the asset, the driver, providing great customer service and all those things. But it's the shady ones that end up costing us money. Not only do they cost us money, they cost us time, and they cost us our sanity too. So those are the ones I want to focus on today. How do we know? What does a shady dispatcher look like, or what are some of the games they end up playing? Well, how about the one that has the attitude that they're going to load the truck at all costs? And what I mean by that is it's almost like the only thing they care about doing is getting a load on you so they can check the box and get you off their board. They don't care that it isn't time efficient for you. It's not going to make you the best money. It's not going to make the company the best money. It's just like they wanted to get you out of their area and push you off into somebody else's area or zone, and that way you're somebody else's problem for that next load or next week. How about layover roulette? Have you ever heard of that? Well, what the heck does that mean? It's sometimes you get the layover, sometimes you don't. You're just not sure which one you're going to get. But a lot of times it feels like, if you're a driver, it feels like they've set you up on a load that should pay layover, and then they conveniently forget. Or maybe they tell you, oh, get with me next week or on Monday, and I'll get you your authorization number, or however your company does it for that, to pay that layover out. But conveniently, they forget to do that. They don't really do their job. Are they doing it on purpose? Yeah, maybe. Sometimes they do, especially if they have some kind of incentive plan within dispatch and how they move trucks and how efficient they are. So, they just don't want to pay out those extra dollars, so they conveniently forget to do that for you. Or maybe they even create a situation that doesn't really qualify. You got to know the company policies and how your company looks at layover. Do you have to sit so long before they're going to pay it type thing? But sometimes it does feel like, if they can't pay you layover for 12 hours or 24 hours or whatever that rule is, it's like they just get you loaded under the wire just at 23 hours or right at the 11th hour, something like that. So, sorry, you don't qualify for layover, but it still costs you time and it still costs you money. So, man, I just hate when dispatchers do things like that to drivers. Do they do it on purpose? Gosh, I wouldn't hope so, but I think the reality is some of them do. The interesting thing is, in a well-run company, management is going to empower that dispatcher to do the right thing for the driver. So, in our case, if we ran somebody and we had to pay layover for some reason, and whatever our policy might be, let's just say it was you had to sit 24 or something like that before you got paid, and it was 23 hours and you got your reload on. So technically you don't qualify for the layover, but the dispatcher should have the power to look at that and go, gosh, listen, this guy sat for 23 hours, didn't do anything. He didn't do anything wrong. This was our issue on a planning side. We couldn't find the load, or the customer couldn't get us the appointment we wanted. Whatever that looks like, still get that driver something. So hopefully you're working for a company that empowers their people to do the right things for the drivers. And then what is the layover, the dollar amount, really? Sometimes it's almost like a slap in the face. It's a little bit painful because you sit for 24 hours and you're probably making, if you're a company guy, maybe $300 a day, maybe more than that now. And then they're going to offer you $50, $75 for a 24-hour layover. It does just feel like a slap in the face, and that's probably just a really poorly written company policy, or a company policy they haven't updated in about 20 years, something like that. But man, that sure takes its toll on the drivers too. Those poorly written policies. It makes me think too, dispatchers have such an impact on your ability to make money. and maybe it's a dispatcher, maybe you've got a setup where you've got a planner or a scheduler that actually puts the freight in the system with the appointments and stuff. But thinking about the appointments and the juggling that goes on there, sometimes they're too tight, meaning there's no way you can make that a delivery appointment. So dispatcher tells you, oh, just go in, go try. They'll take you when you get there. And sure enough, you get there and there's like, hey, you missed your appointment. Sorry, you're going to have to reschedule, come back tomorrow. We're going to put you at the end of the line today, whatever that looks like. But again, that's just really poor planning on the operations group. And they're not taking any accountability for it. It's almost like, hey, I get to go home at 5 o'clock at night. They don't really care how it affected you, and then it costs you money, and you're sitting there with a bunch of downtime and not going to be able to bring in the income that you should be able to for the week. Multi-stops can be another one. Sometimes the way the multi-stops are scheduled is not efficient, doesn't work well. And the challenge from a dispatch point of view is that sometimes you're at that receiver's mercy, right? So you don't always have a ton of control over it. You kind of take what you can get. But the downside of that is the driver is the one that ends up kind of taking in the shorts. They pay the ultimate price for poor scheduling and poor timing on those type of things. And attached to that, it makes me think about how, a dispatcher really has two customers, right? They've got the actual customer, the shipper that's got the freight, and then they should be treating you, the driver, as another internal customer. But what hurts is when they kind of side with the outside customer, the shipper, if you will, and they just kind of take this attitude. It's like, oh, well, they're the shipper. They're always going to be right. And then you just have to take whatever's dealt to you. That's not fair. You want a dispatcher that actually is willing to stand up for you, stand up for the company, and figure out something that works for all parties involved. So that can certainly happen too, where they do whatever it takes to please the customer, but they don't care who gets the short end of the stick on the driver's side of things. So drop yards are probably one of the best things ever in trucking and transportation. If you work for a carrier that's had or willing to invest in extra trailers, maybe a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 type trailer to truck ratio, that's fantastic. The whole idea behind that is that you bring in the load, set it down. They'll have the shag guy or local guy, whatever you call them, deliver that load on Monday. And in the meantime, you're hooking to another loaded trailer on Saturday and you're boogieing right back down the interstate. So it's a great efficiency thing when it works. The problem is sometimes dispatchers don't communicate very well. Maybe they didn't even go as far to look to see if you could have dropped that load in the yard over the weekend and if they had something else to keep you moving. You had hours to work, right? But nope, they checked out at 5 o'clock and went home, so you never had a chance to have that conversation with them. But that's just really the mark of somebody that, again, doesn't care. They just want to check the box. You're under load. Why does it matter? They're off for the weekend and they won't come back in until Monday. So it really comes down to just dispatchers that care and know how to take care of drivers properly. Have you ever had a dispatcher that pressures you to keep moving? And I think about maintenance comes to mind, I guess. Typically maintenance is communicating with operations and letting them know when something's due. If you've got preventative maintenance due on your equipment, hey, we need the truck for a couple hours, half a day, whatever that looks like. But a dispatcher, they're either going to make that happen or not. And if they're selfish and they're not thinking about the maintenance department and the importance of getting that preventive maintenance done on the equipment, they've got pressure to cover a load. So they're just going to keep you moving. The problem with that is, what is it going to cost you down the road? So you skip the maintenance, you skip the oil change, the lube job, whatever that was. It's going to catch up with you later down the road. So does that come does it catch up with you in the way where you've had now a costly breakdown that's going to cost you even more time? Or is it an inefficiency thing where they bring you back in for the maintenance and it really wasn't scheduled now? So what should have been a 2-hour job now turns into an all-day job because the maintenance department is working you in where they could. Again, because the dispatcher didn't take care of it when they were supposed to. How about the black holes out there? What's a black hole? Well, it's where we send trucks. It feels like they never come back or return, but it's usually areas of the country that is really hard to find backhauls in. Does your dispatcher do that to you on purpose? Man, I hope not. And maybe that's more of a sales issue than anything, where they're taking freight to poor places across the country, or they're taking freight where we can't get the trucks back out of very efficiently. But your dispatcher certainly has some influence in that. So be cautious with that. Watch for that. Sometimes the trips sound fun. I know in our case, one of the black holes that we struggle with is probably the West Coast or the Northwest. For our particular mode of transportation, the drivers love it. It's good miles, scenic views, nice long haul, stuff like that. But when you get groups of trucks up there, same day every week, something like that, it can be a real struggle for those backhaul planners, dispatchers to get you back out of there efficiently. So is your dispatcher setting you up? Yeah, maybe. So you got to watch out for that stuff as well. Or how about, again, with the black hole, thinking about that and the whole appointment thing, did they set you up with a bad appointment time? So there's probably nothing worse than a late appointment on a Friday, right? Hey, driver, I got a great load for you. It's long miles. It's going to an area of the country we like to do, and it delivers Friday at 4 p.m. What could go wrong there? Well, it almost feels like you're going to have an automatic layover for the weekend. Now, maybe you needed a 34, maybe it works out all right, but I don't think they always go that far to look. They're more worried about covering the load so they can get out of there on Friday or for the weekend than they are about the consequences of that late delivery time. So don't let them back into that corner. Watch that. At least ask some questions. And if it's a situation where you're the only truck that could cover it, they can't reschedule it, can't get a different appointment that makes more sense for everybody, then what are they going to do for you? How are they going to take care of you? If it does result in a layover, don't tell me that the layover policy is I got to sit for 24 before I get paid for anything, and then you only end up getting a day layover instead of 2 or 3 full days. So make those negotiations up front when you and the dispatcher are talking. If they really need the help from you to cover that load, then they should be willing to make those negotiations. So if I'm a driver, how do I know if I'm being taken advantage of by a dispatcher? What do the red flags look like? Well, one of them can just be consistent low pay. Did you start with the company, the recruiter promised you, you're going to get so many miles, or your gross paycheck should be so much, and you struggle. You've never hit it. What's going on there? It could be a dysfunction in dispatch, meaning some drivers hit high miles, some drivers hit those big numbers, the big compensation, and bring it home. But if you're not one of those drivers that is willing to step forward, ask, talk, communicate, and fight for the loads that make sense for the hours of service that you have, you're probably going to get the scraps. In other words, if you let a dispatcher or a planner run over the top of you and you just always take, you don't want to make any waves and you just take what they give you kind of thing, then you're probably going to be lower miles. Another red flag might be if they're always trying to pressure you into taking crappy loads. Again, are you easy to pick on? Are you the new guy on the block? Are they taking care of their favorite driver somewhere else and you're just going to get the leftovers, so to speak? If you feel like that, it's probably true if that's what your gut's telling you. Or maybe it's lack of respect. Are they belittling you? Are they ignoring your concerns or your requests? In other words, you did the right thing. You put in your home time requests to get home on a certain day, certain week, whatever that looks like, but they just keep running you. They keep missing the home time events. They're not paying attention to you, and quite frankly, it doesn't sound like they really care how they treat you. Are they poor communicators? Do they keep you in the dark? Do they communicate at the last possible minute? Do they send you a message on Friday night and then run out the door? And usually that message that you're getting at 4:59 in the afternoon is probably not good news, or you're getting the worst load on the board, that type of thing. So what kind of communicator are they? If they're just not good, if they're not proactive, they're not taking care of you, that is a huge red flag, because the best dispatchers out there are constantly communicating with their drivers. Where are you at? What do your hours look like? When are you going to be available for the next load? Let's talk about a pre-plan. What's that look like for you? This one's going to get you close to the house, and then from there, we'll get you home for your time off on Friday. So that's how a proactive professional dispatcher acts. If you never hear from your dispatcher, that's a huge red flag. So if you suspect that your dispatcher's playing games, or you're just really not happy, what do you do about it? What can you do about it? The first thing I would do is make sure you document everything. So that just means documenting your loads, your miles. If you work off a mobile comm system in the truck, maybe it saves that, so you will have access to that. But it might be your trip settlement sheets at the end of the week that come with your paycheck, things like that. But start to document that. And then document conversations you have. I would say put it in writing. So if you have a mobile comm system in the truck, or you text, or whatever that is, however you communicate with your dispatcher, save those things so you get some of that stuff in writing. There may become a time when you kind of need that, especially if you get to the point you have the conversation with your dispatcher, things aren't getting better. What's the next thing to do? It's to talk to their supervisor, maybe a member of management. That's when that documentation is really going to come in handy. Not only have you documented what has happened, but you've actually got the times, the dates, how you were communicating, and then their lack of response, or maybe the negative responses they got back to you. So that'll go a long ways with the documentation stuff. Know the company policies. So in most cases, most companies still have a policy manual, something like that. That'll come in handy for you as long as they outline the layover, the downtime, the detention, the breakdown policies, all those things where maybe you feel like you're not getting treated fairly or getting the pay that you expect. Make sure you understand the policies. Go back and read them. If they're unclear, ask. Sometimes I think policies can be written vague on purpose, kind of in a gray area, where that way they can make it fit this way or that way, or they can kind of play it to whatever angle they want. So that's a little bit dangerous. But anyways, it's just great to know what the company policies are, because the idea is you're going to hold them accountable. If they said this is their layover policy and they didn't follow through with their policy, then you got them on something. Then you're going to go to management and you're going to have a discussion on that. So what options do you have overall? I think you got to kind of figure out, is it just a bad dispatcher? Is it this one person in operations? Have you talked to other drivers in the fleet and they're happy with their dispatchers? Or is it the company as a whole? A lot of times that's what happens. It's the company's got a bad culture. It breeds bad behavior in dispatch, and those dispatchers are just acting like the leaders that they follow. So that might be the case too. And only you can figure that out. And I know you don't want to leave. We don't want to create a bunch of turnover, and you don't want to start job hopping. But if you can't get this resolved, I wouldn't stick around that long. Give them a chance to get it fixed. And if they can't get it fixed in a couple weeks, or you see the same behavior happening over and over with that dispatcher and nothing really changed, I think it's time to start putting in some applications. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Driven Too Far. If you're looking for a carrier that puts your success first, check us out at chiefcarriers.com.